I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. I'm continuing here in Mosiah. Now, we just read the first half of chapter 7, which is the expedition of Ammon, when he comes down and finds the people of Zeniff. And we get this convergence of the histories of Zeniff and Zarahemla. We're going to turn now to chapter 21. And to finish chapter 21. We read the first half of this chapter already. We now finish out. This is going to be verses 22 through 36. Now in this chapter, this is the chapter where Limhi's people try to fight the Lamanites and drive them out of the land, and they are defeated 3 times, so that a large portion of the male population is dead, and the majority of those still alive are the women, and they submit themselves to the bondage. But they pray, they reach out to God, and while He doesn't deliver them yet, He does make their burden lighter, makes it easier for them. That's where this chapter was. Now we've already read of the coming of Ammon and the joining of the people, so let us now finish and pick this up again in verse 22. And it came to pass that there was no more disturbance between the Lamanites and the people of Limhi, even until the time that Ammon and his brethren came into the land. And the king, having been without the gates of the city with his guard, discovered Ammon and his brethren, and supposing them to be priests of Noah, therefore he caused that they should be taken, and bound, and cast into prison. And had they been priests of Noah, he would have caused that they should be put to death. But when he found that they were not, but that they were his brethren, and had come from the land of Zarahemla, he was filled with exceedingly great joy. Now King Limhi had sent previous to the coming of Ammon a small number of men to search for the land of Zarahemla, but they could not find it. And they were lost in the wilderness. Nevertheless, they did find a land which had been peopled, yea, a land which was covered with dry bones, yea, a land which had been peopled, and which had been destroyed. And they, having supposed it to be the land of Zarahemla, returned to the land of Nephi, having arrived in the borders of the land, not many days before the coming of Ammon. And they brought a record with them, even a record of the people whose bones they had found, and it was engraven on plates of ore. And now Limhi was again filled with joy on learning from the mouth of Ammon that King Mosiah had a gift from God, whereby he could interpret such engravings. Yea, and Ammon also did rejoice. Yet Ammon and his brethren were filled with sorrow, because so many of their brethren had been slain, and also that King Noah and his priests had caused the people to commit so many sins and iniquities against God. And they also did mourn for the death of Abinadi, and also for the departure of Alma, and the people that went with him, who had formed a church of God through the strength and power of God, and faith on the words which had been spoken by Abinadi. Yea, they did mourn for their departure, for they knew not whither they had fled. Now they would have gladly joined with them, for they themselves had entered into a covenant with God to serve him and keep his commandments. And now, since the coming of Ammon, King Limhi had also entered into a covenant with God, and also many of his people, to serve him and to keep his commandments. And it came to pass that King Limhi and many of his people were desirous to be baptized, but there was none in the land that had authority from God. And Ammon declined doing this thing, considering himself an unworthy servant. Therefore they did not at that time form themselves into a church, waiting upon the Spirit of the Lord. Now they were desirous to become, even as Alma and his brethren who had fled into the wilderness. They were desirous to be baptized as a witness and a testimony that they were willing to serve God with all their hearts. Nevertheless, they did prolong the time, and an account of their baptism shall be given hereafter. And now all the study of Ammon and his people, and the king Limhi and his people, was to deliver themselves out of the hands of the Lamanites and from bondage. So there's a couple of things that we get here. First, we get the story of Limhi sending people out to find Zarahemla. They also get lost. You remember, Ammon, he didn't know the way. He's wandering for 40 days. These people, he says, a small number. Because remember, the Lamanites have the land surrounded, and so you can't send too many or they'll be caught. So he sends a small number. Now, Ammon came in with 16. I think these people who went from Limhi probably had a few less than that, but were around there, maybe 10. They go, they wander around, and they find the land of the Jaredites. That's what we're talking about here, the land covered with the dry bones of the people who had been destroyed. That's the Jaredites. They find the Jaredite record. and they bring it back and nobody can read it. Now, we don't know what this record is written on. It just says plates of ore. Doesn't tell us what metal. Just some kind of metal. When Ammon joins them, Limhi tells them about this because the people came back to the city, they said, just a couple of days before Ammon showed up. And they came back with the news saying Zarahemla has been destroyed. So Limhi just got this news that the city of Zarahemla has been destroyed, and he has resigned himself that they are going to be in bondage to the Lamanites forever. And then Ammon shows up a week later and tells them, no, Zarahemla is still there. I just came from it. I don't know who those people were that you found, but it wasn't Zarahemla. And there is great rejoicing. And they tell Ammon all the history from the time that Zeniff left to the time down, and Ammon and his people. Remember that this is only 3 years after Benjamin's address to the people. Ammon is among those. He was one that made that covenant with God after hearing Benjamin preach. All these men are. So when they hear about the history of the people here, when they hear about Limhi and they hear about Noah and his priests, this causes them great sorrow. When they hear about the death of Abinadi, these are men who are men of God. Ammon is a very righteous man. He is in this covenant. Now he declines to do the baptisms because he does not have the authority. He does not have the priesthood. And I love this about the people of Limhi, because the people here, they're saying, since Alma left and since Noah was dead, these people have been looking into what Alma was preaching. They are reading the scriptures now. They have some copy of the scriptures because they're reading them. And they're starting to realize that Abinadi and Alma were right, and they want to be baptized. But they don't take it on themselves. They know they don't have the authority. And when Ammon comes, they are just ecstatic. Hey, can you baptize us? And Ammon says, no, I can't do that. I don't have that authority. And Limhi's people say, okay, we've made a covenant in our hearts, and we will not go against God's law. We will not try and force it. We will wait until God makes it possible for us. And I love that about these people. Now, on a final note, this does clarify that Limhi thought Ammon and his people were the priests of Noah, or at least were of their group. This indicates to me that Limhi was not real familiar with all the priests of Noah. He probably knew the top dogs, like Amulon and the ringleaders. But there were enough of the priests of Noah, and Limhi was probably a younger man at the time that Noah was killed, so that he was not familiar with all of them. And when he sees these 4 men, he's like, hey, these could be of those priests. And so we know that they've been hunting for the priests. They've been looking for them, because the priests of Noah have been raiding and stealing their stuff. And so that all ties in, that all makes sense. But then we have that last verse there, and I forgot to mention, I love that last verse. As soon as they come together, Ammon and Limhi come together, and Ammon is told the history of the people, and they're explained what their predicament is, and as soon as all that's done, their first thought was, we need to get baptized. Can you baptize us? No, I can't. Okay. From that point forward, everything they did was to find a way of rescuing the people from the Lamanites, getting them out of bondage. Their first thought was baptism. Their first thought was to complete that covenant with God. Their second thought is to rescue the people. Now we will turn back to chapter 7 and finish out chapter 7. So I will see you there.